Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You go to emailrevealer.com and get an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. Also, if you think your spouse is cheating on you, we have an online infidelity investigation. You give us their email address. We trace it back to online dating websites and personal ads. Catfish investigation. If you're chatting with somebody online, you want to verify their identity through their personal ad or from their email address or their phone number. Hacked email account investigation. You think your email account's hacked? Someone's reading your emails? We can monitor your email account for you and find anybody snooping around in there. Digital forensics, cell phone forensics, computer forensics. Yeah, you're hearing about this whole thing about the FBI couldn't find these messages. We'll find them for you. Okay, with this FISA warrant case here. Also, two quick announcements before we get to our guest, Barbara Casey. Her website is at barbaracaseyAgency.com, and we're going to be talking about her book, Assata Shakur, a 20th century escaped slave. But before we get to our guest, coming up February 5th, Monday, at 3081 South Maryland Parkway, is a restaurant over there. 3081 South Maryland Parkway, Monday in the evening, about 5 p.m. I'll get back to you with more details. I'll be speaking over there. Got a little speaking gig, and I'm going to be talking about the McMartin Preschool. Some new information we came out about that. Also to Jeffrey Epstein, Trump's connection to Epstein, and also to Trump and Stormy Daniels. I've been doing some interviews about the whole situation with the President Trump and Stormy Daniels and my connection to all that. So that's all coming out February 5th. It's a Monday, 3081 South Maryland Parkway. But you can always get a hold of me at oppermanreport@gmail.com, and I'll hook you up with more details and more information. But our guest today is Barbara Casey. Her website is barbaracaseyAgency.com, and the book we're talking about today is Assata Shakur, a 20th century escaped slave. Barbara Casey, are you there?
I am here.
Okay.
Good to be here.
Great. It's good to have you here. Tell us about yourself. Who is Barbara Casey?
I started out in public relations at a small college in North Carolina, and while I was working there, I would do freelance editing on book manuscripts for a lot of the professors. And from that, I went into writing my own books, but I continued my editing services. And then eventually I opened my literary agency, but I continued writing my own books. And that's pretty much been my whole career is in publishing. I started out writing fiction and have had several novels published. Most all of them have won awards. But my last two books, I decided to switch to nonfiction. And the first book was about Catherine Kelly, the mall behind Machine Gun Kelly, and it has been optioned for a movie. And then my latest is this book on Assata Shakur. That's pretty much what I've been doing with my time.
And you've always lived in North Carolina?
No, I'm in Georgia now.
Okay.
I have moved around my whole life. I was a military brat, and I went to school in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina and North Carolina State University, and then West Bend College also. And but eventually I wound up here in Georgia on top of a mountain. I have 3 rescue dogs, a husband.
Is he a rescue husband, too, or you found him the conventional way?
He claims that, but I don't say that.
Okay, great. Now, what about, since the book just came out in 2017, do you have any appearances coming up you want to promote, like a book signing or anything like that?
Well, I've already done quite a few, and I don't have anything in the immediate future. But thank you.
Yeah, I just checking because since we didn't get a chance to talk off the air much, I always I forget to ask that a lot of times in email. Do you have any appearances coming up you want to promote? Now, let's get this out of the way first. The whole situation with Assata Shakur's relationship to Tupac Shakur, because there's always confusion. A lot of people think that's his mother.
No, she is not. She's his godmother. She was his godmother, and she was an aunt through marriage, but she is not his mother. And a lot of people do make that mistake. There was a close connection between them. They saw each other and on a regular basis, but she was only related through marriage, and she was his godmother. Right.
See, I grew up in New York back in the 70s, so I'm very familiar with this case. And a lot of people, too, they conflate this case, this police shooting on the highway over there with these Black Panthers and these Black Liberation Army members with the Matula Shakur case, which was the Brinks robbery. And Matula Shakur was Tupac Shakur's stepfather. So, you know what I mean? So, and people kind of confuse the two cases with each other.
Well, there were so many things going on at that time with the Black Panthers. They were committing a lot of crimes for their cause, and most of the crimes had to do with either killing authority figures, especially in law enforcement, or they were committing crimes to, like, robbing banks to get money in order to support their cause. So there were a lot of things going on, a lot of criminal activity.
Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we just had on last week, we did a repeat. We had on Betty Metzger and her story of the burglary about these activists who burglarized the FBI headquarters and how we found out about the COINTEL program, which was targeted the Shakur family and Assata Shakur and, of course, Matula Shakur. But now it's interesting because I was reading your Amazon page, and I'm 55 years old. So and I did grow up in New York at the time, so I'm kind of familiar with this. But I was surprised to see how many people commenting on your book were unfamiliar with Assata Shakur, or Joanne Chesimard, as she was called back in the early 70s. Did that surprise you as well?
It does, because her story continues. That's the thing. The name is constantly coming up in the news even today, especially with the change of relationships between Cuba and the United States. You'll remember President Obama tried to open up that relationship, and but he was, so therefore everyone, the Governor Christie in Jersey and the FBI and the patrol, New Jersey Highway Patrol, they're all reasserting their effort trying to get Assata back here. Of course, I'm jumping the gun here, but she's in Cuba, and they're trying to get her extradited back to this country to finish out her prison term. So her name remains in the news. And when President Trump, even when he took office, of all the political prisoners that are in various places around the world, it was her name that he mentioned, that he wanted to get Assata Shakur back. So it's an ongoing and developing story, even though the crime itself took place so many years ago.
I'd say at my age, it doesn't feel like that many years ago. I'd say in some ways it doesn't feel like that long ago, but in other ways it really does. I'd say when I try and get out of bed in the morning, I got aches and pains all over. When did Trump mention this case? After he became president?
Yeah, well, yes, he did, which I thought was very interesting. It was in one of his major speeches right after he became president.
Okay, that's interesting.
And it could be because he and Governor Christie were close friends, and maybe that was something that Governor Christie had mentioned to him. I don't know, but when he was in the speech, he was talking about the political prisoners and the ones that have that they're trying to get extradited back to the country, and especially Assata Shakur.
Right, because even a lot of activists are concerned that with the negotiations with Raul Castro, that as a bargaining chip, that he would return Shakur back to the United States after giving her asylum. So let's get it. But we wanted to get into that later on because there was a whole prison escape and stuff like that. It was an incredible story. Things were a lot different back in those days.
Yeah.
So let's get into the whole story of the young Joanne Chesimard. What caused her to become an activist?
Well, I think that was the one thing that finally allowed me to write her story. I knew the 60s. I was young, but I was aware of everything that was going on. And you were young, too, at that time. But I know you remember all of the riots and the bra burnings and all of those things that were going on across the country. And but with that is that came after Assata was born in 1947. At least that's what the official record is. They never did find her birth certificate, but they're saying she was born in 1947. And the one thing that connected me to her was her childhood, because I have two daughters, and when she was a child, she was happy. She divided her time between her mother, who was divorced, and her grandparents, who had property down in a place called Freeman Beach, which is just outside of Wrightsville Beach in North Carolina. And they had a restaurant and kind of a hotel-type place and entertainment center, and that's where she would spend her summers. And as a child, her grandfather would take her to the library and get her books, and she would spend her time in the back of his old Jeep reading the Bobbsey Twins and normal things that little girls did back then. And she would entertain the customers at the restaurant by dancing and collecting money and helping her grandparents where she could as a young child, because they instilled in her a strong work ethic and the importance of being confident and sure of yourself. Those were some of the things that they felt was important. For some reason, Assata always, even as a young child, had this wild streak in her. She ran away several times, especially when she would go to New York to live with her mother. And she would just take off for days, this little girl. And she would depend on strangers to feed her and let her spend the night. She would go exploring in different ethnic communities and just absorbing the atmosphere. So she always had that wild streak. And she eventually, Evelyn, which was her mother's younger sister, took her in to live with her. And Aunt Evelyn, God bless her, because she probably saved her life, but she was studying to be a lawyer. And she plays a huge part in Assata's life later on. But even then, Assata ran away, and before she finished high school, and it was because of Aunt Evelyn that she convinced her to at least take her GED and get her high school diploma, because she was working illegally in bars. She was underage, and it was a horrible life for this young child.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second. Evelyn Williams, fascinating woman who later on became actually Assata's defense attorney. Now,
yes.
I noticed when I was doing some research on you, you've done other articles about Evelyn Williams?
I did, because she just fascinated me so much.
Yeah.
Here's this woman who had her own law practice. She was involved in a big case and was progressing through that area of law, trying to make her own changes in society, but legally, doing it through the law. And then she gave it all up, or all of her own goals, in order to defend Assata. And that was the very nation of her, really.
Now, Evelyn Williams, she's still alive today?
She is. She's retired, and interestingly enough, Assata's hope